Okay, so we started this discussion on file system abstraction, and basically we discussed what this abstraction tries to do, what is the goal of file system abstraction, and then we started discussing about the two key things that are there. One is called file and other is directory. And we saw that file is just a linear sequence of bytes. It is completely unstructured, so that basically we can have a generalized way of representing various types of files and devices and other things in OS using a file representation. And file has a human readable name as well as a unique low level name, and it has other attributes like size, permissions, locations on disk. All that is uh, metadata information which is stored in some other data structure that we'll talk about that in the coming class. And directory is also a kind of a file only, but the only thing is that its content is specified. It has a specific construct. It just contains basically a mapping of the human readable file name with its inode number, which is the low level name of the file by which OS identifies that file. So it is just a mapping information. The content of any directory is always this. And these files and directories can be arranged in a tree hierarchy, starting with a root directory, and you can either give an absolute path or a relative path with respect to the current working directory or parent directory and so on. And then we started discussing about the system call interface that the Linux or Unix based OS provides. So generally it first requires you to open a file by providing its path name, either absolute or relative path name, and then various permissions, various arguments for which if you want to read, write, and do all those things. So basically this system call checks when whether that file is existing. If it is existing, whether the user has sufficient privilege to access that file and so on. And once that is opened, it returns a file descriptor through which now all other operations are done with that file descriptor. And that file descriptor is basically is nothing but the index of the descriptor table which OS maintains for every process. So per process it maintains one file descriptor table, and generally the first three descriptors generally represent the standard input, output, and error device. And then whenever you open a file, then lowest and generally these are already assigned. So the one which is free, the lowest index which is free, generally that is assigned to a new file whenever it is opened. And the content of this descriptor table is just a pointer to a system wide open file table. So an OS maintains a file table for all open files which have been opened by different processes or the OS itself, where basically it stores all the metadata information about that file, its file type, its read write permission, which process has this, and so on. So this descriptor table will have just a pointer to that entry into the open file table. So and we argued why this kind of a sequence of doing an open and then reading, writing using the file descriptor is better as compared to accessing the file using the inode number or its path name number. To access using inode number is not user friendly. You cannot remember inode is a large integer number, and it can change from file to file. When you move from one operating system to other, it can change. And path name, if using path name, if you want to do read write, it is expensive, because every time you do a read write, it has to basically fetch the information about the file by traversing the the tree hierarchy from starting from root. And to do that, basically it has to do multiple disk reads. So for every folder or every directory that it needs information, it will have to first read its inode, which is its data structure where the metadata about that file or directory is stored, and then it has to read its data, its content, So for example, it has to directory content is basically the number of the files which are there. So to know which files are there within a directory, you have to also read the content of the directory. So that means that you will need 2 disk reads for every directory that you traverse from the root up to the file. So it is very expensive, and so it makes sense to use file descriptor once you have already opened a file and you have checked, you're satisfied with all the security, uh, all the permissions and everything. Then it is very natural to use the file descriptor itself to do read and write. And another advantage using basically using a file descriptor to do read and write is that basically it implicitly tracks the offset. So this file descriptor, as we have seen, it is basically a fixed uh, is a pointer to the entry into the file table, which basically also stores an offset. Whenever we do and read write, these offsets get changed, and this file descriptor basically implicitly is aware of what is the new offset. So maybe so so if you, for example, if you do a read of 10 bytes, then again when you use the same file descriptor to do another read, the offset would already have been shifted to from the starting location to 10 bytes new location. So when you open the file, initially the offset is at the beginning of the file, and when you do one read operation, let us say of 10 bytes, so your offset gets changed to 10. And then if you use the same file descriptor, because now this file descriptor is already keeping track of what is the new offset, basically it is going to read from the next location. So if multiple process, so if there are multiple processes have opened the file, open the same file simultaneously, and they simultaneously try to basically write or read from it, then the diff, then because there will be different file descriptor for each process, so the tracking of the offset will be very easy. It will be automatically implicitly managed. So if multiple process open the file, then the different offsets for each process will be easily managed by the different file descriptors that we will be getting. So whenever we open a file, we generally assigns a new file descriptor. Even if the same process opens a file again, it will get a new file descriptor. So so the offsets get implicitly managed easily. So that is another advantage why read and write was designed using the file descriptor. Is that okay? Does it make sense? Anybody has any question? There's a question from my side. What will happen if a process tries to basically read from a random file descriptor without actually opening the file? So my question is that, let us say, so as you see, the file descriptors are nothing but just these integer values of your file descriptor table. And another process, let us say, has opened a file and it has got some file descriptor, let us say 3, or basically which is an index of his own file descriptor table. So if any other process, if tries to randomly use any file descriptor, will it be able to access that particular file or no? Yeah, so it will be OS will detect it that it is not a valid file descriptor for that process, so it will basically not allow it. So just like in case of memory, whenever a process tries to access a different memory which was not allocated to it, OS has a way to check that, and it would raise a segmentation fault or something like that. So similarly here, you cannot get a you can only use those file descriptors which the OS has written to it. So whenever you have opened a file using a valid system call, and OS has actually checked that permission and given you a file descriptor, using only those file descriptors, you can access any file. If you try to use any random value of the file descriptor, you will be basically having a bad luck. You will be either your process may get terminated by the OS. So it won't be allowed by the OS. And one good, if you want to know, like whenever you run a program or whenever you are doing any command, you're executing any command, internally there are many system calls happening. So for example, if you are doing simply, let us say if you are reading a file, or if you are basically displaying the content of a file, let us say using cat command. So that means it will be first opening that file, it will be reading from it repeatedly till it reaches the end of the file, and then closing the file. So this command we have used many times. Implicitly, this will be the program will be like this. It will be basically opening the file. It will be doing read operations in a loop till till the read returns a null value, and then it will close it. So if you want to trace out what are the system calls that are getting executed, there's a good command which is called strace. There's a command line function provided in Unix, which basically use another system call for this. But you can use this strace command with different arguments if you want to look into a process, how that process is executing, what system calls it is calling, and if you want to debug even some kind of a error, system level error, you can actually use this strace. It's a very useful system call. You need to little bit become aware of what it is basically. So let me just show you a demo. So let me just create, so I am in a directory, there is already a file. So that file has a content hello only. So let me if you want to trace this, how this cat program works, basically you can use this strace. Sorry, strace. The recording is not good. Okay. So strace, and then if you run it, you see there are a lot of things it has traced out. No, it is not good. Anyhow. Okay, so it may be a little mind-boggling to see what all is going on, but if you try to see what it is doing, is nothing. First of all, basically it's a shell program. It is going to call an exec function to execute this cat program, the binary of the cat. So it will generate is there in /bin cat, and so it is first calling an exec command, and then basically it is doing some basically all those library related things, memory map, the shared memory mapping and all that. So for us, the relevant system calls for us are here. If you see, we are reading. Let me just simplify this. So you can provide some arguments to simplify it. For example, one argument is, I think, C. So this argument only just summarizes how many system calls have happened. So for example, read has happened 5 times, write has happened 1 times, close has happened 21 times, fstat, which basically gets some stat information about different files and all that. So these are different system calls that were executed by this cat command program, and how much time it took, basically I think it's very negligent, so it is showing 0 and so on. So as I said, this open read write, there are multiple read write close, you can see, because it is not not only opening this file that we are concerned about, but it is also opening many OS library files like user lib and all these things, and all those things for execution, for memory management and all that. So for it, first it prepares it is basically spawning a child process, and when a child process is spawned, a new virtual memory has to be allocated, and so our environment has to be prepared. So all these things are basically preparing that environment for the child process to run, and the child process is doing these things here. So I can further simplify this to just trace out, if I just want to trace out system calls like read, write, read, write, know whether it will need a space, read, write, and close. So we want file system related system call, and that is open at. So open at is same as open with slight different thing. Did something. Trace into read, write, close. Maybe should not have. Yes. So now it's only showing you trace of these particular system calls that we have specified. Only read, write, close, and open. Open at is slightly different than open system call. It is basically used when we want to specify the path with respect to a particular directory. A file, when you specify a file descriptor for a particular directory. For example, these are, I think, current working directory file descriptor. So internally OS is using this open at system call rather than simple open system call. So anyhow, these things you need not to worry about. All these things are just, but for us, if you see, these are important things that we want to understand. So first of all, it opens the file. This cat program tries to open the file, and it returns the file descriptor whose value is 3. So as we have said, first 0, 1, 2 are reserved for standard input, output, and error. So the first free file descriptor that it found was 3. So it basically returned a file descriptor 3 for this file. And then subsequently it is going to do read and write operation with file descriptor 3. So it did a read operation with file descriptor 3, and the buffer basically returned this hello/n, which was the content of that file, so the number of bytes that it returned was 6. And then it basically this cat program is going to print it on the console. So the standard output is file descriptor is 1, so it is writing it is using a write system call to print on the standard output, which is your monitor here, console. So it is going to print the same output that was there in the file, and that also returns 6. And then it tries to do one more read, but now it returned null. So it is going to stop it and close this file, and then close the standard input output also and exit. And all these are error successful use, so they are all returning 0 as the return value. So I hope you can see how this you can use this strace to figure out internally what a command is actually doing, what system calls it is calling, and what arguments, what things it is reading, what is the. So there are a lot of details. There are many arguments you can use man page to understand how to use this strace. But it's just one demo to show you how to use some simple utilities in Linux to figure out more information about the internal working of a program, especially the system calls. Any question till this point? Okay, so then as we said, normally when we open a file, we get a unique file descriptor. So every file that we open in, how is FD mapped to the actual file location? Yeah, a good question. So I'm just coming to that point. We have already talked to that, but anyhow, this diagram is going to show you that. So so I'll answer your question in the next thing that I want to discuss. Sometimes, although most of the times the file descriptors are unique for each file that gets opened, but sometimes these file table entries can get shared, and there are generally situations which does that. One is when we do a fork, when basically there is a parent process. So I think the diagram is here. So when we do a fork, we know parent basically spawns a child process, and we know it creates a duplicate copy of the parent gets created in the child. So everything gets copied before the fork, whatever was the state of the parent gets copied. So whatever file parent has opened before calling fork, all those file descriptors will get exactly duplicated in the child also. So this will be exactly duplicated in the child also. So now both of them, that means both of them are going to basically point to the same entry in the system-wide open file table. Earlier we said if different process open the same file, they will have different file descriptor, and they will be generally referring to a different entry in the file table, because they will have different offsets. Each will have different offsets, although they may be referring to the same file, but because now they will have they will be basically manipulating that file independently. So generally a different offset has to be maintained. So generally they will point to a different entry, but in this case, when a fork happens, this entry gets shared across these two processes. So both this parent and child process this same. So again we are assuming 0, 1 and 2 are already reserved. So if you opened a file, it got a file descriptor 3 basically, index 3. So the child also the same at index 3, the file descriptor will be pointing to that same entry of the file. And this entry, as we said, it is going to store some valuable information about system, about that file that is opened. So one of the valuable information, for example, here is the reference count. So this is basically the reference count. So basically it keeps track of how many shared entries, how many processes, or how many file descriptors are basically using that same entry, sharing that same entry. So that count gets incremented, reference count. So in this case, because once you open a child, now there are two processes which are sharing this entry, so the reference count becomes 2. Otherwise, normally it will be just 1. And let us say it had done a read operation of 10 bytes, so the offset was 10. So then for child also, this file descriptor will have the same offset 10. And of course it will have the information of the location of inode. So as you asked the question, how is FD mapped to the actual file location? So we are yet to talk about inode. What is inode? Basically, it is kind of a data structure which keeps track of the actual file location, the actual block where the data of that file will be residing, and all the metadata and so on. So that I'm not going to talk now because it needs a separate class to discuss that. So that will be another, that will be some data structure, some things stored somewhere in the file. So this entry will also have a pointer to that inode. This inode is going to basically have everything, its low level number and its file name and all those things, its actual location, the block number, sector number on the disk and all that. So all that information is there in this, and the pointer to that or the location of that inode is kept here, file table. So using file descriptor, you get to know where the inode is there, and from there you get to know about the file information. So that is how through file descriptor you will be tracking about the actual file location. I hope Varun, it gave you some idea. More details will come shortly. But I hope you got the basic idea. Now, Mike, one thing is that now you may be little bit worried that if you are sharing the same of when you are doing a fork and both parent and child are basically having a same handle to the same entry. So now is it good or bad? Because now if child does a read operation, it is going to change the offset, and that change offset will reflect for the parent also. So now they are no more independent. They are no more, they cannot independently now modify this file. Yeah, so there will be some kind of an problem may happen if you basically doing this, but it has an advantage also. Why the designer of OS went for this design? Because it has an advantage that both the parent and child, or if you create basically multiple child process, let us say, maybe multiple child processes, then they all can cooperatively basically write to the file without any need for any extra coordination. Because the same offset is being shared across the parent or child or multiple child processes who are accessing that same file entry. Now if parent does one write, then offset gets incremented. Now the parent, when the child does another write, it gets appended, it will not overwrite it. So now they can cooperatively write to a file or read from a file without having to write an extra code for doing that synchronization. So this is an advantage why even file descriptors are copied, so that because normally when you spawn a child process, your job is some kind of a multi-threading. You want to do some cooperative task to be done, either between parent and child or between multiple childs. So this kind of a sharing is a natural choice or natural design choice to have, so that you don't need an extra, you don't have to write an extra code to do that coordination. Whereas if you still want an independence, let us say if you still want that parent should have an independent handle rather than the child, then it's very easy. If parent still wants, if parent wants or any other process wants a separate handle, separate file descriptor, then basically what should he do? He can simply reopen that file. So as we said, if you reopen the file, you get a new file descriptor. So if you want, if the parent doesn't wants to be affected by the read and write done by child process or other processes, then he can simply reopen the file again and then use the new file descriptor to independently operate on that file. So that is more easy. Whereas if you did not, so this thing is easier to done. Whereas the reverse way would have been difficult. If the design was such that the offset was not shared, the file descriptor was not shared, then to coordinate would have required a lot of efforts. Whereas to make it independent is very easy. You just have to reopen the file using one system call. So I hope you can appreciate the design choice that the makers of the Unix OS system did in deciding these interfaces. Any question on this point anybody has? So another way the file descriptor can shared is using a dupe or dupe2 command. There is cousins dupe2, dupe3 system calls. So this system call also allows a process to create a new file descriptor that basically refers to the same underlying file. So what does this mean? So let us say you open a file. I'm not writing the entire thing. Basically, you open a file, it returned a file descriptor, let us say 1, and then you did a read operation on that file descriptor 1, maybe in some buffer, maybe some size, let us say 12 bytes. And then let us say you open the same file, let us say again, you reopen that same file. Then you will get another file descriptor 2. And let us say you use this dupe system call to duplicate, let us say, the file descriptor 2. Then it will create a new file descriptor 3, but with a subtle difference. What that difference will be? So let us try to see the difference. So if you have so 0, 1, 2, let us say 3, 4, 5. So let us say 0, 1 and 2 are reserved. So when you opened file first time, this was your file descriptor 1 basically. So this will be basically mapping to having a pointer to this system wide open file table entry somewhere. Okay, so this will be your file descriptor 1 will be at index 3, and once you do a read operation, its offset is going to get changed to 12. New offset location will be 12, and then when you reopen that file, then that will be given a new file descriptor which is available is 4, and this will be now having a separate entry in the file table with an offset 0, because we have just reopened it. So when you reopen it, it will point to the beginning of the file. And when you use the dupe system call, then this is also going to create a new file descriptor fd3, which will take this index 5, but it is going to point to the same entry, just like in the fork and the child case also. Both these file descriptors were pointing to the same entry in the open file table. When you use the dupe command also, both file descriptor 2 and 3 are basically referring to the same entry in the open file table, and which, although now both of these files are basically referring to the same underlying file which has so every file will have just one inode. So both of these entries are actually referring to the same underlying file, but there are two entries created in the system wide file table. One is this entry which keeps track of this offset is 12, and the another entry, the offset is 0. So I hope you understood the slight difference. With dupe also we can we can create a duplicate file descriptor which will point to the same file table entry and eventually to the same underlying file. So what is the advantage of using dupe? Why this system call is provided? Anybody knows this? Anybody can guess the use of dupe system call? There is another, so dupe system call just takes a file descriptor and returns a new file descriptor which is mapped to this. There is a dupe2 system call which basically allows you to specify. So this dupe system call will just find the lowest file descriptor which is available. So in this case, 0 to 4 are already used. So it will give the lowest available was 5. So it will basically copy file descriptor 2 to this fifth location also. But dupe2 allows you to specify which is the new file descriptor. So it takes the old file descriptor as the argument and the new file descriptor as the argument. And that way basically it now basically creates a new file descriptor, which is basically a copy of the old file descriptor. So it maps that thing to that new file descriptor location that you provide to it. So can anybody guess where this system call will be useful? For redirecting. Yes, good. So if you remember in Unix shell, when we used basically when you have to do output redirection or input redirection, input or output redirection, or if you used pipes, I don't know whether you use pipe in the assignment or not, when you have to use a pipe for communicating across processes, then also you need to redirect the input and output and so on. So all those things can be easily done using this dupe command. So if you want to, so the new file descriptor, you substitute it by the standard input or the standard output. So if you replace it with standard output, then instead of your file, the file that you have opened, instead of the output going to the console, it will go to the old file that you have opened. So in that way, you can redirect the information using these dupe commands. So I hope this was not discussed in the Unix shell when we gave you the assignment, and on purpose we did not ask you to do a lot of pipe and all those things. So you could do without dupe, without using this dupe system call. You can just close and reopen it and do that. So in purposely we simplified your shell assignment so that you don't have to do this dupe system call. But if you had known this, probably there was another way to do whatever you did earlier. Any question until this point? So there is no question. Then let me talk the next important point. I'm purposely going in a little bit more detail about this file system API system calls, because we are not going to have any programming assignment on this file system calls, unlike for process and synchronization, concurrency, all that. We had some assignments, so you could actually read on your own and get a practical hand-on experience about various system calls and functions that are there. So, but here, because our semester is ending, so we are not going to have any more programming assignment. So in class only, I'm discussing more details. Although all these details are available in your chapter, in your book chapter, file system interface. So I'm just repeating from there. Ideally, I would have liked you to read it on your own, but because I know you don't read on your own, so I'm trying to discuss in the class also. So somebody asked, can you explain dupe again? So as I said, dupe is nothing, is basically allows you to create a new file descriptor, which a duplicate file descriptor, which basically points to the same older file descriptor or the same open file. So if you have created a file, you have opened a file and got a file descriptor, and if you duplicate that file descriptor 2, you get a new file descriptor, but it is basically essentially a copy of file descriptor 2. So both of them are going to point to the same entry in the system wide open file table. So both of them, so if you do a read using file descriptor 3, that will get reflected in file descriptor 2 and vice versa, just like it was happening with parent and child. But if you're not doing a fork, and if you still want somehow, for some reason, if you want to have a duplicate file descriptor, for example, if you want to do an output or input redirection, so then you can use this dupe system calls to create a duplicate file descriptor, so that one of the handle can be used for our output or input redirection and another can be used for some other purpose. So the actual importance you will realize when you, so maybe it may be a good exercise to go and read about how shell program uses this dupe system calls for maybe input output redirection, or for the mechanism of pipe between cooperative processes, and then you'll appreciate better the utility of this. Okay, so another important thing about this interface, is about write. When you do a write operation, there are multiple options that can happen. So when you are issuing a write system call, then when will exactly that data will be written on the disk? Can differ depending on what design choice the OS file system makers make. So when the system is actually written on the disk, that it is then when we say that data has become durable, means it is going to exist in the system for a long time, and you can fetch it again whenever at future point of time. So there are multiple options that designers could have chosen. One option is, of course, to have whenever you do a write operation, you immediately write the data on the disk. Then the system call returns basically. Then you're sure that the data has already been written on to the desired location of the file. So this is basically called write through in some terminologies. Just like cache and memory, we have a write when we have something update in a cache. Every time the cache may not get the content of the cache may not get updated on the memory for performance reason. So if it gets immediately reflected in the memory, it is called write through. If it gets reflected after some time, it is called write back. So same thing here also can be done. So when it get immediately returns, it is good for because it's conservative. It is most conservative, but performance wise it is very slow because we know we have a disk IO scheduling. In order to have better performance of disk IO, we need to buffer multiple writes, reads and writes in a queue, and so that we can reorder them based so as to minimize the mechanical movement of the disk. So it is generally not preferred by most of the OS. So what is the desired? There are other options also available, but Unix file system basically goes for this option where it buffers it does some kind of a buffering when a write is issued, and it does not guarantee that it will immediately be written onto the disk, but at some point of time in future, generally it can be maybe less than 30 seconds or so on. So at some point in time, in a matter of few seconds or so, it guarantees that the data will be flushed on the disk. It will be made durable. So that will lead to a high performance because now you will have, if multiple write comes during that period of time, you can reorder them and synchronize and make it more efficient. And but the problem is if power loss happens. Now your system call will return immediately, but the data has not actually been written on the disk. It is just kept in the buffer. And if during that time power loss happens before the data is made durable, then you are going to basically lose that data, isn't it? So it is kind of a risky thing. So some application may not mind it. If some low risk application may not mind it, losing that data for high performance purpose. But some applications, like if you are doing a database transaction, for example, if you are running an OS or in an ATM machine and you are basically you have transacted some money from your bank account, and then before you leave the ATM, you basically plug off the power supply. Then you even though you have got your money, but that amount may not have been debited from your account. So those kinds of applications, database transactions and all those which are very sensitive to that, they do not want to do that. So if an application cares about so the file system should have some facility for those applications to make it concrete so that data loss cannot happen. So for some applications who need that kind of a guarantee, for them a system call is given by the file system, which is in Unix it is called fsync. So you provide the file descriptor basically to the fsync. So whatever write that was done on that file descriptors, all those writes before you call fsync, all that will be flushed to the disk location of the file. So that will guarantee. So whatever, so before you, for example, that ATM machine, before it dispenses out the cash, it first does fsync, and only when fsync returns successfully, then you are sure that the data has been updated, the record has been updated, and then only you will basically dispense the machine will dispense the cash. So then way you can be assured that you are not playing dirty or there is no risk involved here. Is it clear? Anybody has a question? No, I think there is no class after this. So let me just 5 minutes more I can discuss and then I'll stop. Because it is related to this. So you can also do renaming. There are function calls for renaming a file and command line commands also for that. For example, you do in Linux you can use move command mv, and by that you can change the file name to a new file name. And this system, if you do a trace on this command, you will see that this internally calls a system call called rename, which basically takes an old character, the file name, old file name, and the new file name. It will be a character star, I think, and so on. So it will basically there may be more arguments, but it basically takes a new file name and it creates, basically it just renames, it replaces the new name by the old name by the new name. But good thing about this system call is it is implemented in an atomic fashion. So it is guaranteed to either, so it is atomic with respect to system crashes. So even if system crashes while you are doing a rename, either the old name will remain or a new name will remain, not an intermediate thing. So basically it guarantees that, so that it will happen in atomic fashion. So this rename system call can then be used if an application wants to update a file, let us say a txt file atomically. Means while you are updating that file, if a system crash happens, either you will have only the old content or you will have the new content, not an intermediate, partially the old content and partially the new content. So if you want to do that, if you want to ensure that atomic updation to a file, then you can use this rename and this fsync system calls. So you can first step, you will do a write to a temporary file, temp.txt, let us say. Then you will do an fsync on that temp file to guarantee that now whatever the new content that you want is actually there on the disk in some location with the file name temp.txt. And now you wanted that content to be in file.txt. So now you can do a rename. You can just rename this temp.txt with the new name as file.txt, or the entire path that you want to give. So that way now you will ensure that this file will be replaced by this file. So if there is a system crash happens in between at any step, either this file.txt will not change at all, or if all the three steps were successfully done, then this file would have been replaced completely by the new file, which is your temp.txt, which contains the old and the new content. So in this way you guarantee that you can atomically update any file if you want. If any program wants to atomically update, ensures that guarantee, like a database record or whatever, those applications, sensitive applications, they need to do this, they need to follow this pattern of writing. So I will stop here. I wanted to discuss some more things. Maybe I think I can give you This is a homework exercise, so some reading exercise. So how to remove a file is a reading exercise to you. Basically, this removing uses a function system called unlink. So it is not called remove, it is called unlink. So why this unlink, why this mysterious name unlink? Please read about it, why this is called unlink. And also read about this stat command. This stat command is basically used to get more information about files. So maybe this I can just show you here, because let us say there is a file here, and so let us say just this file. So you can see it tells about some metadata about all this file, what is the size, what is the number of blocks. So this is interesting. This is giving a number of blocks to be 0, although there is some content there. We have seen there is a hello world written there. It gives this inode number, when it was accessed, when it was modified, changed, who is the owner, user ID, and so on. So if you want to know that file properties and all that, you can use these things. But just I will leave an exercise to you to think about why it is giving the number of blocks to be 0, why it is calculating number of blocks to be 0. If I do this stat on, let us say, some other file also, let us say cpu.c, again its size is 272, still it is giving blocks 0. But if I do this on, let us say, threads.c, so these are the programs that I used in the introductory class. Thread.c has little bit larger size, 661. For it is giving a block of 8. What is a block? Block is basically, we have talked about sector. Sector is 512 bytes. Block is some multiple of sectors. And generally when a file system assigns some data to a file, it assigns in some multiple of sectors, which can be like 1 kilobyte, 2 kilobyte, and so on. And it is giving 8 blocks to this. It is calculating 8 blocks for this. So this is a kind of a mystery that you need to understand why. I will leave it as an exercise to you to find out on your own. If you are not able to find out, I'll explain. So we'll continue this from the next class. We'll probably directly go to the file system implementation in the next class.